Hoa is a 2D side-scroller taking place in a serene land inhabited by a wide array of charming creatures. You play as Hoa, hence the name of the game, a young fairy navigating the world after being separated from her family. While the vast majority of stories provide you with context to the events that happen throughout it, Hoa takes a different approach. It keeps a lot of things vague while simultaneously drip-feeding bits of info as to why you are on the quest that you're on. It's only once you've reached the end of the game that the full context is given to you. For some games, this kind of approach would have irritated me, but given the fact that Hoa is a short, 2-hour game, not only did I not mind it, I think it actually makes the whole experience stand out a lot more. The way that the final cutscene gives meaning to everything that came before was a surprisingly rewarding moment that made me look back on the journey fondly. Nevertheless, I'm going to remain tight-lipped when it comes to talking about the story, as I do think that giving any indication as to what it's about would make the ending feel less fulfilling. All I'll say is this: throughout the game you wake up various massive creatures from their slumber. They all know who you are and have had history with you. It's through conversations with them that you realise you've been separated from your family. Each one gives advice, has something to teach, and in general helps you on your quest to be reunited with them. And that is where I stop talking. It's not a complex story. In fact, it is as straightforward as it gets, but the characters and the world itself is what makes it memorable. For those familiar with Studio Ghibli films, everything about this game feels like it belongs there. It's very much presented like one, and the visuals only enhance that vibe. Speaking of visuals, saying that it looks gorgeous is an understatement. Right from the moment you open the game, you are greeted with these beautifully painted landscapes filled with vibrancy and cuteness. Again, much like a Studio Ghibli film. Hoa has a pretty wide colour palette, and it uses this to magnificent effect. The world is split into 6 key sections. You have forests, treetops, underground cave systems, underwater cave systems, an industrial factory, and the spirit world. And while some are similar to others, the forest and treetops for example, each one is still completely unique. They all stand out not only thanks to their variable structure, but also because of their appearance and design. Each one practically has its own set of colours. The forests use greens and yellows, the caves use purples and blacks, and the factory uses browns and greys. Because they are so distinct, it's easy to remember every single one of them, and this isn't even getting into how they differ from a gameplay standpoint, something I'll get to in a bit. I also want to give praise to the lighting, as I think it really emphasises the attention to detail these levels have. There's one specific part of the game, in particular, that completely blew me away, and that was during the underwater section. In the background you can see a massive group of jellyfish floating in the distance. The way the light reflects off them is just stunning to look at. I was mesmerised by it the whole time. Hoa is filled with sights like this. Just when you think the presentation couldn't get any better, it introduces something completely new that leaves you in awe. There aren't many platformers, or games in general, that I can think of that have that kind of effect. I do think it's a shame that some of the cutscenes interfered with that though. This was probably a glitch on my end, it very likely was, but I had major stuttering throughout the cutscenes, especially in the final one. It was actually quite hard to watch at times. Luckily, that kind of performance issue wasn't present at all in any other part of the game. The optimization is perfectly smooth. Before I move over to my thoughts on the gameplay, I just want to make a quick mention of the soundtrack because it is glorious. Those set pieces I just talked about are made even better when you have the music accompanying them. There were a couple of moments that gave me chills, I'll leave it at that. As far as appearances go, Hoa more than excels in this department. It's easily one of the best looking games I've played in a long while. The Studio Ghibli vibes gave me a bit of nostalgia while playing too. Put it this way, if you're a Studio Ghibli fan, you might as well just get the game right now. Alas, let's talk about the gameplay. Hoa is primarily a platformer, but there's puzzles mixed in throughout as well. There's no violence of any kind, and the experience as a whole is more or less consistently relaxing. Unless you're being kicked by these guys, that isn't so comfy. Because the game has that calm atmosphere, it has to hold its punches when it comes to difficulty. That isn't to say the game is easy though. It's more that things are simple to figure out, whereas execution requires your full engagement. Levels like the one on the screen right now are a perfect example of that. In terms of how you approach them, it's rather straightforward. Jump on the leaves and head to the top, but some of the obstacles introduced later on make it more complex than it initially comes across. Still, if you're not great at 2D platformers, I wouldn't say there is much of a learning curve. Then again, this is coming from someone that's played a lot of 2D platformers, so maybe I'm not the best person to ask. There is one level that I know for a fact that a majority of people will struggle on, and that's this one. The Spirit World, the last level in the game. It's uncharacteristically difficult. Don't get me wrong, it's really creative and I'll give them credit for that, and its overall presentation. I understand the desire to keep things refreshing in each chapter, but this was too much. I still enjoyed it for the most part, but it did irritate me a bit too. For the rest of the game though, the difficulty is perfectly fair. The platforming is incredibly smooth. I don't think I ever had any trouble with it. The controls were a slight hassle, so maybe play this game with a controller instead of a keyboard. In terms of its gameplay mechanics, it is just as varied as everything else. Throughout the story you learn new abilities that help you progress through your journey, ranging from double jumps to being able to fly. Each one is given to you at a time when you need it the most, which helps with making the transitions between environments more conceivable. The more of these abilities you acquire, the more varied the gameplay loop becomes. What starts off as simple jumping from platform to platform turns into needing to bounce on specific objects or push rocks to make new pathways. As I said before, it never gets repetitive because the game finds ways of bringing in new challenges. In regards to its puzzles, the majority of them are integrated into the platforming elements. There are moments that are all about finding the right timing, knowing where and when to jump as well as what abilities to use in order to do it correctly form the basis of what playing Hoa is really like, and although you get the occasional hiccup like with the last level, putting that aside, I struggle to find any faults in it. Is it a highly comprehensive game? No, far from it. But what's there is incredibly well polished and has had a lot of thought put into it. I never felt idle while playing it. Everything that I was doing kept me engaged. If everything I've said hasn't given a clear indication as to what I think of the game, I'll just lay it out simply. It is brilliant. Not only is it beautiful to look at, but it's also a whole lot of fun to play. It's not just there to look pretty, it's there to challenge you. Don't be fooled by its seemingly simple gameplay, because there's much more to it than meets the eye. I mean, just you wait until you get to that Spirit World level. Oh boy. I can easily recommend Hoa to anyone. It is jam-packed with charm that makes it difficult not to smile at, while at the same time, there will be moments that will leave you in awe. It will do more than just leave an impression on you. It will stick with you long after the credits roll. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the review then be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one. Let me know in the comments what you would like to see me review next. Until the next one, bye.